Today on Patrick Childress Sailing, we're going through all the steps to get this boat ready to haul out of the water, and especially on a travel lift that has the weight capacity but not the physical length to accommodate our rigging. Something has to move. Hello, we're Patrick and Rebecca Childress on the 1976 Valiant 40 brick house. Anytime during the video, if you wouldn't mind clicking on the subscribe button down below and also the thumbs up button, that'll be much appreciated. And if you feel inclined, there's a tip jar. The link to that tip jar is located in the video description. Thanks a lot for all your support. Now, let's go get this boat ready to haul out. What a relief to be able to tie to a concrete dock like this in Richards Bay, South Africa, and have all those long coastal passages and storm dodging behind us. Now we can relax a little bit. But a storm did move in on us that night with high winds, torrential downpour. We were buffeted at the dock, but it finally did ease up and it became a pleasant day late in the day the following afternoon. But where else in the world can you tie to a concrete dock like this for free? At least for the first month, and have access to fresh water and electricity. The only other place we know of is possibly Rodriguez, out in the middle of the Indian Ocean. There you can tie up to the concrete dock and have fresh water, but no electricity. So these are only two places in the world that are incredibly unique and generous to passing through cruisers. There is a downside to free though. Just across the road off to the port side of Brick House is a very loud boom boom disco, which every Friday and Saturday night they play their big obnoxious music until 3:30 in the morning. And then also behind Brick House is another commercial dock where large tugboats and other workboats tie up, and they have the loudest, almost unmuffled diesels I've ever heard. But it's cool here, so at night we close up the hatches and the port lights, and that certainly helps to muffle those outside sounds. But now that we're here, we can get busy cleaning the boat and getting ready for the haul out. But first, there's a number of things we have to tend to. So we got right into hosing down the decks, cleaning up the boats, and then of course right away I wanted to check the city water here and see what we are dealing with. I started the microbe test yesterday, over 24 hours ago, and the color is still the golden yellow. So there's no microbes that we can detect in this water, so that's good to go. Let's test for TDS, total dissolved solids. Now I've already used this hose for several hours today, let a lot of water run through it. And it's at 290 parts per million. That's a little high for city water, but I tested this city water at a very upscale mall yesterday in the city, and at a bathroom faucet at the mall, it tested the same, 290 parts per million. So that's their standard here in this city in South Africa, Richards Bay, and everybody here drinks it, and everybody says they have no problem with it, and especially if they had problems, it would be because of microbes. And the flavor of the water is fine. I don't taste anything unusual about it. So good drinking water here so far in South Africa. The next thing to do was to wash out the bilges. So I had taken the water hose down inside the boat and thoroughly washed the bilge starting at the very front and worked my way back to the mast, paying special attention to the base of the mast to get all the salt water that might have contaminated the mast area, and give that a fresh water rinse and a scrubbing all the way back to the sump pump. Then I started back in the engine room and worked my way forward to the sump pump and thoroughly washed everything, got everything nice and clean in the sump. And just before we left the dock to go over to the haul-out facility, I brought in buckets of water and filled up the sump and flushed that out, and also disassembled the check valve that we have in the bilge pump line. and then thoroughly dried everything. I want this boat just as clean as possible, and so it can dry out easily while we're hauled out of the water, and have everything nice and clean inside of the bilges. I hate these stupid little finger holes. So let's see, oh, here we go. Here's some liquid ant bait, and there's another type too. It's a very dark color. We'll try them both out on these ants. I found that one ant poison doesn't work for all. So I'm going to put a little bit of both out here. I'll take one of these packets out of here now. It didn't take long before the ants found us. They crawled from the dock, across the docking lines, and onto the deck of our boat. We once had a terrible infestation of ants that we caught in Cartagena, Colombia. Little tiny sugar ants, they called them. And we tried all kinds of ant baits, and it was not until we got this kind in this plastic container that finally got rid of them, and it has helped to kill a lot of other ants that would have invaded us. The active ingredient is sodium tetraborate decahydrate, 5.4%. We spent nearly 1 month here at this dock, getting to know the area, working on the boat, waiting for our haul out, which had to happen on a high tide. But while we were here, the strong winds either blew us away from this concrete, or at other times blew us right up against the barnacles that were encrusting on this concrete. Our fender covers wouldn't have stood a chance against those barnacles. So we had to resurrect the fender board, which has been stored on the deck for the past 11 years and used once. It's a pressure-treated 2x6 piece of lumber with a rope secured on each end of it. By the time we left here, however, those lines securing the fender board were nearly chafed through. It would have been a much better idea to drill a hole through each end of the fender board, as it's shown here, but then drill another hole through the very top down to those holes, so that the line securing the fender board would come down through the top, and then a stopper knot tied so it would rest inside of the horizontal hole, well out of the chafe range of anything on the concrete pier. Finally, the day came that we could haul out at the Zululand Yacht Club in Richards Bay. And to go up on their little travel lift, I would have to take the head stay and the inner forestay apart. Actually, just undo it from the chain plates. I didn't want to have to take the sails off and undo the turnbuckles inside of those roller furlings. There are some travel lifts that have adequate tonnage to carry our boat and haul it out of the water. However, sometimes they're just so small physically that we have to undo the head stay and the inner forestay to fit on the structure of their travel lift. And unfortunately, that's a situation here at Richards Bay. So we have to take the head stay and the inner forestay off, but I don't want to have to take the sails down. I don't want to have to fiddle with the turnbuckle inside of those roller furlings. So we're going to disconnect the head stay and inner forestay from the chain plates. And we'll start by setting up the spinnaker halyard on a bridle forward, and also the running pole topping lift to a bridle that'll attach to the base of 2 lifeline stanchions. That'll give us forward pressure, so then when we release the backstay or ease that up greatly, we'll be able to take the clevis pin out of both the headstay and the inner forestay. Before we do anything to the backstay turnbuckle, we want to mark the threads where they are sitting right now in relation to the turnbuckle. That's so when we reassemble everything and we tighten the turnbuckle back, we want to know exactly where it was previously so we can have the same amount of tension on it. So we'll use blue tape. Never use regular old masking tape. That glue is miserable to try to remove after it's been out in the sun and dehydrated for quite a while. Blue tape is always easy to remove for the most part. So we'll put a wrap on the top of the turnbuckle threads and also on at the lower end of the turnbuckle to mark our position. Then we'll pull the cotter pins. Those only have a 15-degree bend to them, so they're easy to pull out. And then we'll loosen up the turnbuckle. We'll loosen the turnbuckle almost to where we have no more threads left in the turnbuckle. We want it as loose as possible so that we can get the clevis pin out of those head stays. But once it is all loosened up, it's best to use some kind of a anti-seize compound, whether it's Lanacoat, Tef Gel, or any number of other products. There's a lot of them out there. Put those on the threads so the next time when you have to unscrew the turnbuckle, it'll happen very easily. You won't have to put a torch or any kind of severe heat to it to break the rust and corrosion that's holding it together. So once the turnbuckle is wide open as far as we can go, then we go back to the mast and tighten up on the spinnaker halyard and on the running pole topping lift to give as much forward pressure on the mast as we can to relieve the pressure on the clevis pins of both the head stay and the inner forestay.
If it's a bit stiff like that, I'm going to crank down on that halyard again. We still have quite a sag in here.
So that's plenty of sag. A punch and a hammer is very helpful to finish knocking that clevis pin out. But also I have used a block and tackle attached to the roller drum of the roller furling and then down to the anchor assembly, and that helped to pull the sag out of the head stay and gave just enough clearance to either remove the clevis pin or reinsert it.
Okay.
As we released each head stay, we lifted them up and over the side of the boat so that they could hang freely without having any kind of a curve to the foils. And where they came in contact with the cap rail, we cushioned them with some heavy towels or scatter rugs, and then tied everything securely so they couldn't move forward and aft. And we were ready to head over to the marina to get hauled out. There was one more very important thing that we had to do before leaving the dock and heading over to the haul-out facility, and that was to mark the side of the cabin with blue tape exactly where the slings should be placed. There are some haul-out facilities that take absolutely no responsibility where the slings should be placed and require the owner to direct them where to put them. Other times, divers do go in the water to help place the slings, but they don't always make the best decisions. So the best thing to do is to reference old haul-out pictures, take broadside pictures of your boat hanging in a sling, and always use that as a reference then for the next haul-out on where to put the blue tape on the side of the boat so that the slings can always be placed in the same proper spot. You don't want slings bending up your prop shaft, or in our case far forward. I don't want the slings strapping underneath our fairing blocks for our depth sounders. And as soon as our boat was parked, we got to meet some of our new neighbors. They might be cute, but we have been well warned if we don't lock up the boat when we leave, they will make themselves at home, especially in the galley, and they do make quite a mess, and they do not clean up after themselves. And now, the real work begins.